Hello and welcome to the Free Associates. That's right, folks, the Free Associates, the freedom of association, the freedom to associate with anything, any idea, any notion that comes floating down the road like a bunch of riffraff or whatever, flotsam and jetsam in a river, whatever it is, because Lord knows there's times in which you really should consider every opportunity or option. We are on the middle path here in the Free Associates. We're not hard left nor right. We're not particularly interested in the political minutia. 2020 will happen. It will come and go. It'll be a moment in history, and it's an important moment in history. But what we're more interested in are the sociological ideas or concepts or whatever that we could do and apply to society. And so to that end, we generally do not do expert stuff on the show, because if we do experts, then data comes in, and then data starts coming dun, 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 crushing the conversation. You know, when I went to college, when we talked about philosophy, we were not allowed to bring in outside sources. And the reason for that was to create an even playing field just for intellectual discourse. Now, I have the Free Associates card. You know it well. One of my former students said, hardcore is what he said, which I think is as good a compliment as you can get. And speaking of hardcore, I'm going to hypnotize Waylon. Waylon, you are now under my control. You shall do and think everything glittery. I tell you to. That was glittery. It generally does not work with you, however. You just go and get combative. We've had some combative episodes recently, but it's you know, our combat is over like that fundamental question of how fast things will rebound. And even though I combat you, I'm still rooting for you. I'm rooting for your position in many ways, because I would like to see us rebound quickly. Well, no, I know you're always rooting for me personally, but I don't think you're rooting for my position if I'm being pessimistic. I don't think that's you just don't believe in that. No, that's totally cool. You know, and I picked this reading because I thought you would like it today. This was my gift to you.
Oh. Well, also, her name is Mary Berry, Mary Berry is one of the icons of Great British Bake Off. Not obviously not this one, but Mary Berry is from that show. So
okay,
saw her name. I was like, oh, gentle fields and souffles.
Yeah, well, you know, based on the reading, it could be the same one, honestly, because this person feels like someone who would cook a souffle a little bit. And that's not me being critical. Now, folks, you know, we've been doing Politico series of predictions. We're going to run out soon. We're actually going to run out of predictions. And so we'll be hunting for some new material and new stuff. We got to get Laura Fatarusso back on, because I do need some schooling in social media. I've been running afoul. My sister-in-law texted me at 10:45 on Saturday night saying, dude, you can't do that.
Wait, what did you do? What did you do?
So, you know, I always have an ulterior motive, but I posted 10 photos or like 15 photos on Instagram in one day, you know, and she's like, you can't do that. Like, you're supposed to post one every 2 weeks. And I'm like, but I was kind of like just loading up my pictures is the way I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, you're moving in. You're moving in. You just started.
Yeah, I have some stuff. And she said I would lose all street cred. And I said, my street's really empty. It's you and this other guy, Jim, who's a great guy. But like, no one's paying any attention to me. So, you know, we'll see. But this is for Barbarian in the Valley, which is my other radio show. And you've told me before that Instagram is for young people. You've warned me away. But I'm convinced.
Not warn you away. I mean, it just depends on what audience you want. I mean, if you're warning yourself away, if that's not the audience that you want.
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, I get it. But I like the visual medium for the other show. Because Barbarian in the Valley, I mean, it's a barbarian. It doesn't know how to read, doesn't know how to write. You know what I mean? It's strictly visual situation. So we'll see. Maybe I'll get a bunch of middle-aged men to join Instagram. I think that's the other way to go about this. All right, now listen, folks. We're going to do a quick reading of this. It's not long, and as Waylon pointed out, it is Mary Berry, but it's Mary Frances Berry. It's a professor of American social thought, history, and Africana studies at University of Pennsylvania. It is called A Hunger for Diversion. All right. She writes, some trends already underway will probably accelerate. For example, using voice technology to control entryway security and the like. In the short term, universities will add courses on pandemics, and scientists will devise research projects to improve forecasting, treatment, and diagnosis. But history suggests another outcome as well. After disastrous 1918-1919 Spanish flu and the end of the First World War, many Americans sought a carefree entertainment, which the introduction of cars and the radio facilitated. Young women newly able to vote under the 19th Amendment bobbed their hair, frequented speakeasies, and danced to Charleston. The economy quickly rebounded and flourished for about 10 years until irrational investment tilted the United States and the world into the Great Depression. Probably given past behavior, when this pandemic is over, human beings will respond with the same sense of relief in a search for community relief from stress and pleasure. Oh my God. Written by
Love
Mary
it.
Berry, thought by Jeremy Whalen. This
We
is basically
collaborated. We collaborated.
I think yesterday was might have been my thesis statement for the series, and this was your thesis statement for the series. There is a sentence in there that I think is really funny though. It's like right out of like a kind of a bad documentary about the 20s, which is basically newly able to vote on the 19th Amendment, bob their hair, frequented speakeasies and dance at Charleston. It's like, that's like such documentary writing. You can just see them dance. You know what I mean? Just like, all women did that in the 20s, where it really was like 5% of women or whatever.
Yeah.
When you're a history teacher, there's always these like, they're very cliche things that like, the Kennedy Nixon debate. It's like everybody's got to teach about it because it was televised. It was the first televised debate. I try to steer it as far away from that stuff as possible.
And Nixon was sweating, so it was the first time that we start judging people topically.
Right. Although I have to say, on a separate note, I was reading a related source, and Nixon had been sick. He had pneumonia really bad in the weeks leading up to that debate. He was like badly sick on stage. I didn't know that. I know he had a propensity to sweat, but he was also like sick. It's like actually physically sick during that debate, which is interesting. So you love this, but you have no skepticism about this? I guess not. I mean, this is pointless to ask you about.
I mean, the thing that I think that it's a positive outlook, but it's also a pragmatic outlook. I think that what the big thing that I got out of that was that the economy rebounded, but then it was left to our own devices with an unregulated economy. All these forces that be led ourselves into the Great Depression. So, I mean, there was external forces too, but that's kind of like we were talking about yesterday about the things that are the similarities between the 2008 recession and now. And I think that, again, we're searching for that sense of community and get back to the things as they were. We're going to try to find those deeper meanings in those things, but history has a way of repeating itself. And once we get back into that without sound regulations, we're going to find ourselves in the same predicaments.
Yeah, I'm just so far away from you on this. Like, I don't think we're going to find ourselves in the predicament. I think we're like knee deep already.
I can agree with you on that.
I do not see this. I mean, I've thought about it. I have thought about it because I'm aware as a history teacher that the Spanish flu was followed by a decade of affluence. It was also preceded by the First World War. So there was, obviously history doesn't, as Mark Twain would say, although we're not actually sure he said this, someone said it, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, is the quote. It's never really the same. Definitely you can seek parallels and stuff like that, but it's never quite the same. I just do not see this at all. I do not, if she's talking about there's going to be an exuberance coming up, I don't see how it's economically feasible to have an era of exuberance when we were already headed for a recession. The numbers were already terrible heading into this. And now, this, and I've been trying to research the Spanish flu a little bit because I'm like, did they close stuff down during the Spanish flu? Like, were restaurants closed, or I kind of don't feel like they were. So I don't know how bad the economy actually got hurt. In some ways, okay, this is a little Grim Reaper, Waylon, but stay with me. In some ways, a lot of wealth was freed up by the Spanish flu because a lot of people died. You know what I mean? Because, no, seriously, when you think about it, wealth gets freed up when people die, especially when they have stuff that you can pass along and inherit. So I just do not see this at all. I don't see it at all. In fact, I think it's a prime example where you pick a different period of history and there's seemingly no relation. It doesn't mean you're wrong that things are going to come back. But to forecast a period of like exuberant consumer spending in the next 10 years feels like kind of nutty to me just because that happened the last time. That just seems wacky.
Yeah, I guess. Excuse me.
Yeah.
The I guess what I would go to is that the exuberance and economics are not necessarily intertwined as we are talking about them. So there can be a psychological shift during things like this, and it was kind of outlined in Sebastian Junger's Tribe, right? You have a city that's getting bombed. You know, London is getting bombed, and people and people are hunkering down. There's undoubtedly effects to the economy and everything. People are doing less well, but once the war is over, there's a sense of relief. Now, it's a sense of relief and exuberance, I would say, because everything is put into a different perspective. When we are able to lift things and get back to kind of business as usual and kind of go back to the way that we were communing in society before this, you will have the stress of the economic burdens on your family and all these things. But from a psychological perspective, there's also a relief in that, the exuberance in that relief of getting things back to normal. So you can isolate those things when it comes to kind of your perspective psychologically when you're dealing with those things. You might be in a hole it's gonna take a while to get out of, but the immediate impact is that at least we have our health. At least we have our communities, and at least we can get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. It's exuberance doesn't have to just be consumptive spending. It can be all kinds of stuff. One of the things, just on a side note, I don't know if you're feeling this way. It concerns me the messaging that's going out there because I don't feel like that moment's coming anytime soon. I think it could, but I feel like there's so much messaging like we're not out of it. We're not going to be out of it for 2 years. If we're going to fall back into it. I don't know. You know, the Second World War had clear days when there was victory in Europe and victory in the Pacific. Like in Times Square, they were jumping up and down. I don't feel like that's coming with this anytime soon. And that's a little depressing to me, I have to say.
Yeah, I would agree with the idea that a definitive win is not something that necessarily is we're going to see, but there is going to be some sort of relief period in which you all of a sudden, I mean, just think about the first time that you get to go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, think about the first time that you get to go to a concert. Like these things, these are new births at whatever age you are, and it's going to there's a giddiness to it that I think that people are going to have, and there's going to be a novelty. That novelty is going to wear off, and we're talking about some long-term implications with the economic burdens and everything. But I think that there's something to this puzzle. I think that there's something to the idea that we're in an unprecedented time, and we've experienced this for how many weeks now? And the first time that we're going to be able to go out and see some of these people that we're seeing on Zoom and interacting with and doing some of these things, there's got to be a novelty to that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, again, like I just heard that baseball is going to run without people in the stands and stuff like that, which is better than no baseball, except if you're Wayland and you hate baseball. But I don't. No, don't do that, Waylon, because that does not wear well on you. You're a positive guy. You're not an anti guy. Listen, I get that you don't like baseball.
Hey, people can watch baseball. People can sleep during baseball. That's fine. I'm just not a baseball guy.
You're just not a baseball guy, and that's where we should leave it. But it's, you know, not being able to go into the stadium and stuff like that. But look, I don't want to take away from what you're saying because I really appreciate it. To me, standing in front of my classroom is going to be a big moment. You know, standing in front of my door, watching the kids come in is going to, I mean, even thinking about it honestly makes me a little emotional. That's going to be a really big moment for me. Walking my kids down to the bus stop, you know, that's going to be a big moment. So I agree. So that's the kind of exuberance. I don't know. Oh, and let me just say something separately about the Spanish flu. I feel like there's a real misnomer going around. I mean, I don't know how much is going around, but I've seen it in the newspaper and on the Post and on Facebook, which is the second wave of the Spanish flu. People are talking about that, kind of like trying to make some comparison to a second wave. Now, the coronavirus second wave might be really bad, but there is no historical comparison to the Spanish flu, because what happened with the Spanish flu second wave is that millions of soldiers came out of the dankest trenches ever created in human history, where disease had been brewing in the worst kind of way, and then went home. They took that disease, all of them took them home with them. And then people had parades where they hugged them, and then they went on trains and went back home again. So to like make a comparison of the second wave of the Spanish flu is, it's just missing a lot of, like what I just said should do you see what I'm saying, Waylon?
I
It's just
understand.
not
I understand what you're saying, but
comparable.
what I think that is the missing component here is the hypersensitivity that is now experienced in our society through a through the global means of communication that we see. So let me just explain that for a second. With
Okay.
the Spanish flu, you might read that in the paper and you might experience like this crazy outbreak that's going on in communities, but you're not interconnected globally in the sense of, yes, you could get the New York Times in London and be experiencing that, but the visceral sense of and intimacy of being able to see things as they unfold in today's global society with the internet, I think it's different. And also we're able to now drill down deaths and cases of contraction to pretty solid. I'm not saying solid numbers because there's a lot of people that are not tested, but the numbers that we have become more concrete. And so when you lose thousands, tens of thousands of people from a Spanish flu, it's not the same. It's not registering the same because of the information that's being disseminated in the means of communication. It's not. It's you're
Do
not
you see, are
experiencing the
you
same thing.
saying that, okay, just want to
Kind of,
clarify.
yeah.
Are are you
I'm kind of
saying that,
muddying that up, but
no, well, are you saying that life was just cheaper back then in terms of how we reacted to loss of life? Because no, I mean, I think
not
that's,
yeah. I'm saying
oh,
that,
come on,
yeah,
I think
well,
that's
ignorance
true.
is bliss, is what I'm saying, and that you're not really understanding exactly how, in the moment, like we are right now, being able to track literally every single day the amount of people that die in New York City or Boston or
Yeah.
things like that. You're not registering it on the same level back then, so therefore
Mhm.
it's not that it's certainly a threat, but it's not that persistent threat that we see in our society because of the age of information that we live in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, no, I see that. And that's totally fine. And I do think that kind of what you're saying is our hyper awareness of what could be happening to us heightens our anxiety and fears and what we take seriously. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that. But don't you agree that what I say stands, that it would be hard to compare a second wave of coronavirus to the second wave of the Spanish flu, which actually goes to your point, which is they didn't really know what was going on. And millions of soldiers did come home and they gave them parades and people hugged and kissed them and by the way, the Spanish flu there's no better disease incubator than a trench in France. I mean, it's filled with water and rats and dank and wet. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the whole story, but that started in Kansas. It started in Kansas at I think I can't remember the fort, and they were burning horse crap near the fort. That's what they were doing because that would be a standard thing to do for the cavalry. And that somehow unleashed this thing where it jumped into humans. Those soldiers from Kansas took it over to France. But it had spread around a little bit already. And then in the trenches, it got really virulent, right? Because it's the perfect place because you can kill somebody and still jump to the next host really easily, right? Because
Oh yeah.
diseases spread, you don't want to be too virulent because you'll die out. But the trenches are perfect. I'm just saying, like, I think we have to be careful with our historical parallels because to say the second wave of COVID is going to be like the Spanish flu is to ignore the fact that millions of soldiers who had been in the worst kind of situation came home and spread it. We're not going to have that. We're talking not even about the college kids coming to school, although I suppose there'd be some parallel there, right? That college kids would be the equivalent of millions of soldiers potentially, right, for the spread of disease.
Yeah. I
You know,
mean,
I don't know.
I mean, the first thing that I think about when you say that is we understand this better, but we don't necessarily have the control. We can analyze it better, but we still don't have the self-discipline. I would say. I mean, that's the difference between the times of the Spanish flu and now. So the best way to look at that is that heat map of everybody's mobile phones from spring break.
From spring break,
and you know, it's a lot. It's obviously there's parallels there, but it's not the same it's not the same population. But we're able to analyze and scrutinize things like that. But we're not necessarily preventing things. You have Georgia and other states that are, for the most part, opening up, and we'll see the consequences.
Well, you make another good point, though. I think either advertently or inadvertently, which is that back in 1918, except for those soldiers, no one was traveling around like we travel around now. I mean, if you lived in Northampton in 1918, you might have one big trip in your life or something like that. You may go to New York once every 5 years, maybe. Most people aren't getting past Springfield. And, one of the things that happened during the Black Death is that Europe was coming out of the Dark Ages. Like, the Dark Ages were really good for keeping disease from spreading because people just wouldn't travel. They wouldn't leave their villages. As soon as the trees started getting cut down and roads were being built, that's when death started coming back into these villages. And in some ways, they were kind of weak. So your point, I think, is well taken too, that like the second wave could be worse because actually, hey, look, what we're looking at is the same kind of mobility you would have had of millions of soldiers coming home, if not the same virulent, spreading place. So that makes me actually reconsider it because very few people would travel to Europe in 1918. How many people got to Europe? You had to be in the high class to go to Europe. I mean, really, you'd have to be really wealthy.
You get on a ship and be like, oh, yeah, there's a pandemic going on.
Oh yeah. Well, and I do think that is part of it. And I do think life was probably a little cheaper in 1918, 1920, But I'm going to have to go ahead and say I think Mary Berry is out to lunch a little bit. I do not see what she's talking about happening. I don't see anyone dancing the Charleston anytime soon. I don't see any wacky new dances. And I guess I'm not.
I guess the thing that I'm kind of unsure about is just like this cultural burgeoning of what's going on, and like I don't know about this kind of cultural, what I would say, new lease on life. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I really like the idea of just the psychological relief and the psychological exuberance from the relief, being able to and again just experiencing things you don't, it's the age old saying, but you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. It's there's going to be some really significant moments which like you said, there's emotional, like being in front of a class. It's like every single day you take that for granted, and I think it's going to be more significant emotionally for all of these things and the novelty of it than we're anticipating right now.
Well, and I've told my students, I say, pay very close attention the first time you come into a room with other people. Pay close attention to your body. How does your body respond to like actually being around other people? Because in no other time in your life have you been able to be deprived of that to this extent. So being in a crowd, how does it physically feel? How's it going to make you feel? Like we've never done this before. I've been around my two kids and my wife. Although we actually have a family that we're quarantined families together, which is great. We've all been cooped up for 2 months. We're all healthy. And no one's seeing anyone else particularly, and our kids get to play on the trampoline, and that's great because my kids need play dates like that. Especially my 4-year-old, I feel like needs physicality. He needs physically to be. He can't Zoom. He's too young to have a Zoom relationship with anybody, but he can seriously, he can tear around the yard, and so thank God for that. And you know what else I think we'll get is the permission to say no to things that we wouldn't say no to before. I mean, I think that could be that keeps coming back to me and resonating with me that I can kind of say no, like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going on that trip because like I don't want to. Like it's I know it's supposed to be a cool trip. But
that's like the ultimate Larry David moment. Like this could be an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld. It's like, no, got the COVID. And he just like totally milks the system by not going in.
Right. I don't really, yeah, I get the joke there, but I don't think it's that. I think to me, what it's about is dedicating myself more locally. Like just kind of dedicating myself more locally, not going to 5 different places in the summer, but like staying around and, like developing my neighborhood and like kind of going back to a time where rampant travel wasn't happening. Like I'm pretty serious about that, like that vision.
That's interesting. I'm the exact opposite. The minute I can start traveling internationally again, I'm itching to do it. I had a whole bunch of trips planned, and this threw a wrench in the works. But now from my perspective, I'm losing time from being able to do some of the things some of the itinerary of my summer is just blown up. So I want to get out there again.
Sure, and you're in a different part of your life than I am. By the way, I saw tickets to Hong Kong, $500 round trip.
There we go.
I think that you could definitely make up for it because like if you're willing to do that trip, like things would be quite cheap right now. Go to Wuhan, go to the marketplace, have a bat sandwich, maybe eat a couple bats or a couple of anteaters and then come back.
Exquisite.
Oh, geez, folks, we must be getting a little bit off our rock here. I am going to hypnotize Waylon again. Put on the music. You surf. You've been listening to the Free Associates, folks. We like to free associate. We like to freely associate. We believe in free association, all those good things. And we believe in being optimistic for its own sake. And we also know, if history doesn't teach us anything else, you really can't predict much. But it is fun to mull it over. Waylon, what are you doing the rest of your day, pal?
Oh, well, I'm covered in Bondo right now, if you haven't seen with my hands. But I did a whole bunch of work on the van, getting it prepped for painting. So I was gonna paint the spots on Vanessa, but looks like it's a little overcast. I want to do it on a sunny day. Going for a run.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You have to answer immediately. Color of the new van is?
Screaming blank. I will give you that. I'm not going to give you the color, but it's literally the first word of the color is screaming.
I know what you're gonna do. It's yellow.
Screaming.
And I know from your face that
we're screaming.
Right. I think that's a good
folks.
choice. Yellow is a good choice. Screaming yellow is a good choice. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. The quarantine family that we're quarantined with, I'm going to take my kids and they're going to have them for dinner. And Robin and I are going to go for a bike ride. And Waylon, I haven't been separated from my kids even for 1 minute for 2 months.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's not small.
Yeah.
It's not just small. And this is one of those things where you can't build up your expectations too much. You get disappointed, because it is such a valuable commodity. All right, folks, for whatever you're doing the rest of your day, we hope that you enjoy it, whether it's Bondo or bonding with your wife or your husband or whatever it is. And Waylon, thanks for being on. Thanks for running the rig. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye now.